I've seen physical beings that are definitely not like our animals up here come out of these spaces from inside the earth. I've seen in deep underground military bases, dogmen, like you would kind of describe them, some more humanized. And I think a lot of those were experimentation and genetic splicing. I think a lot of that was gene editing stuff that I've seen. But I do believe that some of these things are holdovers from the old days. They're the last of their kinds, and they've been breeding them. Right. And I believe that that's the stuff that's prophesied that's going to come back out and cause the hearts of men to stop for fear of looking after these things that are coming up on the earth. You know, that's why everywhere I went throughout my youth, I could go to these tunnels and these caves and call out, and I could hear them and they would call back, you know, and it's like, it's a seductive power that draws you back into it.
You could call out to them? Like,
yeah.
Was it like a language or a sound or what?
Oh yeah, man. You can learn to call to them. You can go out here in these hills out here and do it. You can still do it tonight. On these full moons and stuff, you can start calling out and you'll think you'll hear coyotes at first. And then all of a sudden it's a totally different, you know, it's a different sound that starts to resonate. And then it's a different one that calls off from over here, right? You got to understand some of these guys that you think are just neighbors and stuff or just people, like this is what they keep in their barn, you know?
Are they
this is the stuff they keep. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I go out hunting for these things.
I understand. I understand completely, man. I was that being said, I got hooked back into it with Timothy Alberino and Steve Quill and a lot of these guys when I was married and my wife didn't know anything about this whole stinking world of who I was and everything else.
How'd you meet your wife if she didn't know who you were? You suckered her. You suckered her.
That's a way to put it, man.
She's still with you, so she loves you, you know?
Bro, she's all in, man. She's amazing. Cool. She is my shield bearer, man. She's amazing. She has fought, we have waged a war together beyond your wildest imaginations. She has seen the full force of the occult come after us and people slaughtering sacrifices to try to desecrate us and people try to hunt us and murder us in front of her face,
She's
man,
seen it.
in front of my children's face. They've sent special kill teams after us in front of my children's face, man. And I have seen the living power, man. Recent.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, man.
That being said, man, I do believe that there is a hierarchy and you can call upon the Most High, man, and he has delivered us. And I've never had to fire a shot at any of these guys. I haven't had to take out their drones. I have seen supernatural intervention. I've seen their weapons jam in front of my face, like chapter in the book called Murder on Their Minds, where I talk all about it, man. I've seen him provide supernatural miracles because you got to understand, we're dealing with the fallen. We are not dealing with the Most High. And he owns a much more powerful arsenal. And let me tell you, at his word, all these nations, kingdoms, and thrones will bow. And it's an absolute reality. It's an inevitability. And so that's why I serve him, man, because I've seen what the power of covenant is. And I had a covenant with the law of sin and death before in my life, but now I have a covenant with the Most High of peace and life. And he's given me a new purpose. He's given me a family. He's given me a mission. He's given me the opportunity to do the things I dreamed of when I was that little. Man, I used to run away in the night in Arizona, man, and I would run into the base of that mountain, man. There's these caves that are there that I just love caves. For me, it's safety in that. People call it hunting and all this. I'm like, dude, these to me were people. I'm more like a beast, man. I was ripping people's throats out with my teeth when I was a child to survive a fight. Like that does something to you when you try to see other children playing with a bat wing toy or whatever. And you're like, you're puking blood in the toilet.
Yeah.
Because of all the crap you just went through the night before, you know, and like you are unrelatable to men anymore. You can't comprehend the things that are in your mind when you have been defiled so systemically for so long. And so I just lived with dogs. I literally would flee into the yards with people and I would crawl into the dog loos and just survive the night. But then that wasn't enough, man, because these were city dogs. Then I started looking for the feral ones, man. I started looking for the coyotes, you know, and then I started looking for the wolves and crawling into their dens because I can imitate any of them, man. I can crawl around like a dog and be like a dog. You bet, man.
Wow.
You can get them to take you in if you know their language, if you know their gestures. You can learn all of this stuff, man. And like when you're little, when you're like a child, they'll treat you different, you know? Yeah. And they like, man, I literally ended up living with these things. And they're like, I have this love for wolves because of that. Because I've understood what a companion can be when you're desperate and distraught. And like, these were my best friends. And that sounds so weird to people, but like when I was a child, I bonded with the animals. I wanted to murder all the people because people were monsters. I couldn't imagine a world of the living. I got so lost in the world of the dead. And I just wanted to find some semblance of innocence and purity. And I could not find it in people because everybody was manipulating me. I was nothing but an asset to them. And I didn't know which end of me they wanted. Do they want my skills? Do they want what do they want from me? And so it perverted my understanding of people. And so I just fled to animals. And that's where I talk to these creatures and live with them. Well, then you start encountering these other ones, and you start to befriend them. And it just becomes like a pack. Well, then my family would rip me away from that and move, and I would have to try to find a new one. And there was this just constant destabilization. And so there's a lot of people that get caught in that world, man. And people brand them as feral children, like you might want to call it, or whatever you want to call it, man. But they're survivors. That's what they are, man. They're overcomers. They're the remnant. They're the leftovers of nightmares. And you know what? They're some of the most incredible people or things that have ever been. And that's why I'm here to preach the gospel to every creature. That's what it says. My commission from my king who gave me my marching orders is to preach the gospel to every creature. And that's what I'll do, man. I'll do it in the tunnels. I'll do it everywhere, from the tops of the roofs to the bottom of the earth. But I'm much more familiar and comfortable down there than I am out here. This is the world of oddities, where people think this stuff is like legend and myth and strangeness. And it's like, you go into these families, they broker deals with this stuff. They get down with these things, and they generationally raise their children to have that seed line in them. So it's a different world than what most people are used to. But I tell you what, these animals they carry a history of what this land used to look like and what these people used to be. And it wasn't that long ago. This is a short history when you think of the last 150 years in the United States. That's not long ago. It was a wilderness. And there used to be 150 million people who lived here, who raised animals and livestock and farmed and cultivated landscapes and brilliant, massive, beautiful cities. And yet they interacted with giants and these creatures that were oddities for time and antiquity.
You're talking about unwritten history.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow. You keep throwing everything out here, and I haven't even got to how you met your wife.
Oh, yeah. We got there.
So are you talking along the lines of like people talking about Tartaria today, and like how they basically built over entire civilizations and some of these structures that we have in these big cities? Like, for instance, I've heard this, and I've heard both sides of it. So in Philadelphia, they say that City Hall is actually remnants of an old civilization. We didn't actually build it. It has been here. Maybe we built on top of it or something like that. But when coming from that area, I used to run Center City, especially as like a rookie driver. They send everybody down to Center City. And so you're pedaling freight down in Center City with a freaking truck. And I can't describe to people how massive City Hall is in Philly. It's one of the most beautiful buildings I've ever seen in my life. And I've been in it. It is absolutely massive. You will get lost if you don't know where you're going. And I forget how long, but the idea of decades sticks out in my head. Like I was told that it took an extremely long time to build that building. And that always sat weird to me. I was like, how does it take that long to build a building? Like, this isn't like something that was built, they say thousands of years ago, where they were, making the brick by brick, make the brick, then put the brick there kind of thing or whatever, And so that I go off on that spiel because that's something that always sticks out in my head when I talk about Tartaria and things like that. But is that kind of like the angle that you're talking about? Like this idea that there was, you said 150,000 or million people that lived here and they traded with giants and the cities and civilizations. What happened to those things?
Well, I wasn't really hitting on the Tartaria and the architecture side of it. And there's other examples like the City Hall in Iowa and other places. I traveled, like I told you before, 4.5 years in an RV. And at the time, mud flood in Tartaria was in. And I was like, what? I'm going to go look. So I just started traveling around to these places specifically to try to find and identify and document evidence of this catastrophic event, or like, are these recovered cities, as opposed to the idea that we, all built these with horse and buggy and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
I wanted to know for myself, but that isn't specifically the history line that I was talking about. I'm talking about before that, the side of it that is definitely more like when you go in, like one of the best books, for those of you that are book guys, The Discovery and Conquest of Mexico by Hernan del Castillo is the firsthand account of the conquistadors coming into the Americas and their strategies and tactics for infiltrating and enthroning a new deity known as Mary, right? The Queen of Heaven. They wanted to invoke her over this territory. And there was a massive battle between the priest class during that time. And you get to see these hierarchy of these ones that were worshiping in Mexico City predominantly, that was running a massive human trafficking campaign on all the sacrifices and slaughters that are happening for that. I mean, it's nationwide at that point. And we're talking millions of people that are being physically fed through butcheries to the priests. Like that's the way they did it. And that priest class fled north into the Americas when they got persecuted. And they came into the Americas, the Northern America, and they brought a lot of that ideology with them. And they began to use that, weaponize that power, and start to take over the people that were up here. And they began to eradicate them and butcher them and force them into compliance with this. And then the land responded with this desecration, and all these invaders began to come in. But this is stuff that they had prophesied was going to happen. And so a lot of them, they literally did not fight. They literally had prophecies that there was going to come bearded men with shiny metal helmets, and they're going to come and you're supposed to bow down and yield to them. And so that's what they did. That's why you had a few hundred guys with a few horses and dogs, unbelievable hunting dogs, crazy stories in their full armor, killing squads of people, these dogs single-handedly. It's
From Europe?
Yeah, bro. You want to talk about what dogs can do? We have no idea what dogs do. Oh, yeah. DeSoto and what he brought with his dogs in the Americas, most terrifying things that the natives had ever encountered was the dogs, because they would kill hundreds of people, like just jump from one to the next, ripping throats out. Like, these are all documented things. So I love that side of the history of understanding where did this all come in here, and why was there the expunging of the record of anybody who had a culture or a written language. Well, that's because we wanted to support this ideology of manifest destiny for this invasion force that was coming from Europe, was that it is our right to rule over these savages and to begin to take their territory. But ahead of that was the surveyors, and then and following them was this military expedition across the West, which was to the Army Corps of Civil Engineering, eradicate the history of the people out there. And that's what they did. That's why they built dams and rivers and lakes in specific places and changed geography. They're sponging any evidence that this is a advanced civilization. But we have firsthand accounts of people that said, we've been in the biggest cities of Europe, and over here, they're better and more beautiful and more grand and well-designed than anything we've ever encountered.
Wow.
This is not just one. Many, 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 many people that came over here in the beginning could not understand the capacity of the people that were here. This is the origin place of the earth in many more ways than what people think of as Africa. This place is where the first documented evidence of a horse, of a camel, of all of these languages, mummies, the oldest mummies in the world. All this stuff is here.
Here.
It's just not public.
Wow.
It's publicly accessible. It's just not popular.
You know what's interesting is that you say that, and fast forward a few hundred years, here we are. And now we look at European cities and we're like, man, they're so beautifully built. Look how clean they are, because our cities suck. Like, everything's falling apart. Nothing's built to last more than 50 years. Like, it's just, it kind of totally flip-flopped. That's wild.